So I finally understand what's happening, and I'm going to try to implement a solution. But first, I'm going to explain what is going on. So basically, the issue is the message, and is very deceiving because the way that they did this, that they designed the class, it implies that they did it in a way that they're gonna handle static strings different than normal string names. So for that reason, because they have the static constructor and this static count, I thought they designed the class in a way that they would clean the static string names at some point. And because there's a lot of code on the engine, I thought that it might be in a different place than the cleanup function. But I think that's I'm not 100% sure because obviously I didn't create the solution yet, but I'm pretty confident that they didn't design a way that they intended to clean the static strings. It's just a differentiation that they did here for the message. And this is this stuff that was going on, that I think is going on, is that the reason why it only shows the message for the static string name created that has the node pattern is because that's the only place where there's a difference between the amount of string names that were not cleaned and it has static string names that were that had that pattern. So basically on the cleanup function, the condition there that shows the message is this condition here. So this variable here keeps track of how many string names you have, and this variable here keeps track of how many static string names you have. So because the node was the only one that didn't have that had a difference between them, it was the only one that was being printed. But the engine actually doesn't clean up any static string names. So if you remove the message, it shows a bunch of static string names. And the reason why it's deceiving is because it made me think that the problem is something related to the sName macro or the place that was getting the errors, which is these 5 different places. And the way that I realized this is because I was trying to solve this one first, the one that doesn't involve the static string name. And then I basically implemented the simplest solution that I could think, which is just to clear the hash map here, because this is a static hash map, and on this situation is not that the string name is static, it's that you have a static hash map, and then because of that, because the string name is on this static hash map, it's not cleaned. So I just cleared here on the destructor, and then I tried to run, and the message doesn't show anymore. So initially I thought that it was some error that I did here, or like because for whatever reason, when you clean, it destroys. But then I changed the message there, and I'm gonna do this now. So I just move this from outside of the condition there, and it shows a bunch of messages. So what is happening is basically that the engine never cleans static string names. So what I'm thinking about doing is to just change this message here, and I'm just gonna leave this part of the message, and then I'm gonna create another function on the string name, and I'm going to create another static variable here, and I'm going to put that's the first thing I'm gonna try to do. So every time that a static string name is created with the static constructor, I'm just gonna push that to the static variable that is going to keep track of all the static string names. And then before the cleanup function runs, or inside of the cleanup function, I'm going to call the other function from the string name, which is just going to go over the variables there, and it's just going to do the same thing that they... I think I should probably call... The reason why I'm not 100% sure is because the way that it works, as far as I understand now, is on the destructor, like the way you clean up the string name is just by unreferencing it, and then when the static count gets to 0, then it's gonna delete the thing. So I think that probably what I should do is just loop over the thing and then check to see if that string name has a data, which is what they do on the destructor, and if it has, then I just call the unref as well. So basically do this condition here. I don't think I'm gonna check for the configure because it's not gonna matter. So I'm just gonna check to see if it has the data, and if it has the data, then I call unwrap on that one. But the thing is, I'm not really sure if I'm gonna be able to call unwrap because unwrap is. I tried to call unwrap. I think on some string names or some situation, I think you can only call unwrap from inside of the string name. That's the issue. So I have to think about a way to dereference. So maybe I will do like what the unwrap does directly, but the thing is that data is probably, yeah, I'm gonna see, I'm gonna try to implement, see what happens. Then if there is an error, I'll try to figure some other approach. And so now there's a bunch of messages. But the difference is that all of them have the same amount of, as it's only the static string names are not being cleaned. Yeah, so I'm gonna do like a sadder. Just gonna comment this out. I think first I'm going to build and see if it's gonna complain, but probably it will. The same way. Then after I do that, I'm going to create. Actually, yeah, let me write. I want to create the variable first. I'm just gonna copy the way that they do this table here. The only thing that is gonna be different is gonna be data. It's gonna be string name instead of data. And then I'm going to see how they do there on the. I think you should probably do the same way that they do the constructor. So like mimic the way that they do the constructor of the static string name. And because they put the string based on a hash map that is based on the string pattern. I think you should do the same. And it's basically based on, so what I'm going to do is just every time that you create, that's the first thing I'm going to try because it might be also that you can have situations where you create a static string name but you don't use the static constructor. That's kind of the problem as well. So if you only do it, so yeah, but I'm going to try this one first because I think the only place where you create a static string name that you would give the message there. The only situation where this stuff is gonna happen, actually, if you change the message, the error message, then it's gonna show anyway. So you would be able to see the place that this string name was created with the static, but not with the static constructor, and then it would be easy to just change the constructor and then figure out. Yeah. So I guess like just by changing this one is probably gonna be enough. So just copy the pattern that they use there to put the thing on the table. The difference is that here they just changed the pointer, and what I'm gonna do instead. Yeah, actually I don't need to do the same pattern. It doesn't have because I'm gonna be pushing the string name to the thing. So yeah, I just have to see how to do this. Actually, I'm not really sure if the pointer is the best way to do it. Yeah, I was thinking about creating a vector, but the problem is that I'm not really sure if it's very good to create a vector or not. I basically just need a way to keep track of all the string names. And then at the end, I just loop over, and then for each one, I just remove. So probably the vector is the easiest way. Because I can ask ChatGPT or something like that as well. And then every time that you use the constructor there and you pass the static variable, then I'm just going to, like inside of here, on top of doing this, I just push to the other static variable that I'm going to declare there. And then at the end of the cleanup, I just call, or I create another function to clean up the thing there. And I just loop over, and then for each one, I call unwrap. If that works. If it doesn't work, then I have to think about something else. This is the problem. Mm. So maybe I should just leave without the message. The issue is that obviously, like these ones, but actually, I'm not really sure if it's obvious because on the other situation they were equal. So maybe this. Mm. I'm gonna go over the debugger then, because it seems that's not showing the message. So I think it should be showing. Actually, I should put, but if it's greater than zero, then it should be. Yeah, I'm gonna put greater than zero. Greater than zero is probably better. Actually, oh, it didn't close. So maybe that was the problem. Yeah, so it did show. Yeah. So I think it's probably better to put greater than zero anyway, because it might show if, yeah, but if it has zero, it's gonna be false, so it's not gonna show. I'm gonna put greater than zero just to make it more clear. Maybe it's probably better to leave without, because there's no point in putting greater than zero. It doesn't matter that much. So I think I'm just gonna leave it like that, and then I'm gonna try to implement the solution. I'm gonna ask ChatGPT probably what it thinks is best data structure. The problem is as well that it might be the case. I think that the issue is the coupling because like the static keywords used outside of the string name. So if you don't create, if you use the static, or if you create a normal string and just use the static constructor, then it might mess up the other logic that is outside of the string name. That's kind of the problem. Hmm. Yeah, but I think I'm just gonna implement that way. I'm just gonna. I think it's probably vector is better. Because the issue, I think that's here. I'm pretty sure that the compiler doesn't create the size because there would be no points. And from some videos somewhere that I remember vaguely, they say that the compiler doesn't allocate memory, obviously, when you create like this. It just allocates the index that it needs. So, and then each time that you try to access a variable inside of the array, you would just create at that moment that it needs the memory for that thing. And in the actual memory, it's probably not like, I'm not 100% sure. I think it depends on the situation. But I think it would make more sense that it's very unlikely that the data is going to be all compacted in the same place for the array because you can have multiple different processes and you have virtual memory and you have threads and you have a bunch of stuff. So, but yeah, I'm not 100% sure about this. So I'm probably gonna create a vector. My biggest concern with the way that I'm thinking now is the situation where, for some reason, someone creates this static, someone creates a string name without using the static keyword, but they pass the value, the variable. That would be an issue. And I think that happened on a fix that they recommended for one of the situations where there was a warning, they fixed by implementing the static. I think it is on this merge here somewhere. I closed the tab, but I think it's probably here. Yeah, so this situation here, so that's how they solved. So I think like this could be a problem because it wouldn't be a static string name, and it would just be created as if it is a static string name. So the issue is if I do the way that I'm doing, then you would dereference that. I think you would try to dereference twice, maybe not. Because after this goes out of scope, it would become uh, like if it is the last one, then you just would destroy the data, and if it was not the last one, it would just make a null pointer. But if I check for the data, I think it doesn't matter. If I check if the data exists first, it doesn't matter because it's the null pointer anyway. So I think it's not gonna matter. Because not like it's gonna be something that you don't delete. It's just gonna be like an additional thing. Type vector. And now I'm not really. So it's probably here. I have to do. Oh, the vector has to be vector. String. I'm not really sure how to initialize. No, let me think about. This is the part that is kind of. I guess I'm just gonna do the loop. Should be equal or smaller. I think I'm just gonna ignore this part here because I'm not really sure. Like, I don't know if I clean up before it's gonna mess up this message. I think this is for if you want your profile or something like that. So I'm just gonna put after this. I think for most cases it's only gonna matter after. Let's get adding the data, push it back here. Data. Yeah, I think for cleaning up it doesn't matter. I'm just gonna leave here. So if it's not empty, then you loop over, get the static string name. If it has a data, then you will unwrap the data. So let me see if this works. So if it compiles, then I'm just gonna push the instance when you create with the static and see if that works. Oh, I think this is the only constructor that's pass the static. Oh, so there's this true here. Probably this one. That's because of the defaults, whatever. I guess I can search those. So the only difference is the count for now. So what I'm gonna do is just push to the vector when it is created with static. I think it doesn't matter that much. Like it is a kind of like an arbitrary choice because it's after the engine runs and like the static is meant to last during the entire thing, but I do think it's worth to change something, but it's kind of subjective whether or not you clean because obviously if you're gonna clean all the uh, static string names, then it's gonna increase the amount of memory you have to use because you have to use a global variable to keep track of all of them, and it's going to make the uh, cleaning up parts of the engine slower, obviously because you have to clean up all the static string names. But if you're not gonna do that, then I do think it's worth it to just change the message so that like you don't count you don't take into consideration the static string names. And then you can also remove the static keyword here because it wouldn't make sense. So like I think the specific way that is done now is very misleading and it doesn't make a lot of sense. Because for someone that doesn't understand the engine, like all the source code, you assume that the class was designed to have the clear distinction, so there's probably a reason for that, and the reason would be most likely is to clean up or dereference them in a different way. And it just made me because like and exactly because of that, it makes you think that the problem is somewhere else when you encounter this error message because of the difference. So I was thinking that it would be on one of the or on all the 5 locations. On the 4 locations that it happens with the sname macro, I thought that was specific to that location because there are several different places where they use the sname as well, and the message wasn't showing up. So I assumed that on the other situations, there was a place that was cleaning up those strings, and I just didn't know where. But for this, for whatever reason, on this one, it wasn't the case. But now I'm pretty sure that is all of them that are not being cleaned up. I'm pretty happy about this because it allows me to like focus on the other stuff now. I think it's not gonna matter for this one because it creates with the static here. Not really sure. And maybe it will matter because it's kind of confusing. Like, like the way that it works is that it's going to run the constructor for this one first, then this one is going to create the data inside of this that is going to point to the place on the table, and then it's going to create another copy of this because the macro calls this. The macro is the one that initializes the static string name, so it might be a problem because the second time that it runs, it calls another constructor, and the other constructor just makes the data of that string name to point to the old one. So it creates the old one with the argument, but the second one is not created with the argument. So it might be an issue because the actual static one is not created with the constructor that passes this. So it might be an issue actually, I think. Let's create the first one. If I push only when it passes this, then it is gonna be the wrong string name that gets passed there. But maybe it doesn't matter because it's the same pattern and all that matters is the amounts of counts you have. But I think it might matter actually because of the way that it keeps track of all the instances. So in order to solve this, probably have to. I think this is not so sure. It will probably be to like change the function here and then just use the other one on the macro. So I would have to change this one. Or I create a flag variable, or like I make the this static as a variable of the string. And then I change the other constructor as well. Yeah, I think that's probably the easiest solution. So that's probably what I'm gonna do. I'm going to create a variable on the string name and puts is static. A private variable. And then I check on the other one, and if it is, then I assign static to the other one as well. That's probably the easiest way. So the constructor is gonna be the static C. I think it's this one, yeah. So when you initialize a string name with another string name. So I'm 100% sure that this is the one that runs there. So it creates the first one passing the static keyword, and then it creates this one with the other one. So this is the problem because the actual static one is gonna be this, the one that runs here. So I think probably the easiest way is gonna be to create the flag variable on the inside of the string name, and then inside of here just assign a check to see if it is static. If it is, a make the value of the current one should be as well. The same way that they are doing with the data. The other thing that might be a problem is the unwrap because since I'm gonna be calling from here and the unwrap is private, I think it only works when you call from the instance. So I'm not really sure if it's going to allow me to call. And if it doesn't, then I have to think about something else. Const string. So just gonna ask ChatGPT. So it's saying the error is just the equal here. The vector is obviously gonna be templated, so it might be the problem. Not really sure though. Yeah, it's still the same. So obviously that should be something else. I'm gonna see if I can find examples here. Yeah, maybe I don't need to cast the type. I just access the value directly. Just replace the name there. But I wanna see if I can find a situation where it converts so I know how it works. Or I guess I can cast. I could use object cast true and then cast, I think. But I want to see if there's another way. So maybe it should be const, but if it's const, I can't. Let me try to see if I try to do it with const, if it works. That's variants. Yeah, the problem is that here is different, so yeah. I guess I can try and see what happens. So maybe if I just remove the problem is if I make it equal, I think it's just gonna copy. So I might unreference the wrong one. So the easiest thing to do is just to do it directly on this, or try to do it directly on this. You should probably use the thing there as well. I'm gonna try like this first, and then use the arrow if it throws a message. Thanks for the follow. I'm not seeing the chats, so just letting you know. Let me try this. So there's another way to do it, which is just to like you do it with the two dots. So in that way you declare the type inside. That way I know that it works because I did some other times, but I want to see if I can do it on this one. This way here. It might be, no, it has to be on that place because so I think the problem is the translation of the types because the vector is templated. So when you access like this, it's going to assume the template of the vector. It doesn't know that is. I guess the other thing that I can do is try to use object cast and then cast a string name. But I think that there should be another way. I'm pretty sure that there are examples here somewhere. Maybe on the nodes class. Um, hmm. Yeah, so I guess the easiest thing to do is just to change to the other. Try to change to the other way to loop. Because using object is probably worse than not. I guess they do it this other way here, where they have the iterator. Sure, yes. But I think this is for when you use the list class that they have. But I've seen this sometimes as well on other parts where they create this iterator class. But I think it's just overly complicated. I don't like that kind of thing. But obviously, I'm sure that they have a reason. I just don't understand very well why it works that way. Yeah, so they do object. So this is an example, I think. So if you want to do it, I have to just do the same thing here. Basically, just put string name there and then create a pointer. But I think I'm gonna try to do the other way. It's just to, I think you have to use cons though. But I'm gonna try like this first. And then just do this. So let's see if this works. Well, the other thing I'm not really sure. Hmm. It should probably be a reference as well or a pointer. It's gonna be kind of annoying when I push, because I think about pushing, passing this as an argument. But the issue is if I just do the string name, I think it's gonna be, but it doesn't matter that much actually. But maybe it does actually, because I think it's gonna trigger the copy constructor if you don't put a pointer. So it's probably better to put pointer here. I think, yeah, probably better. And then here I'm going to do this. I'm just gonna do everything, because it might take a long time as well to compile again. So Yeah, but I think that it's kind of annoying. Mm. Because this solution is probably not gonna work. That's the problem. I'm gonna have to spend time thinking about a different way to do it. It's probably gonna be better to change. I think that this variable here, I'm gonna do the other thing first, and then I think about the other approach. Because the issue is that there's gonna be two. Like if I do like this, it doesn't matter that because I'm assigning the wrong one anyway. So I'm gonna be pushing the wrong string name to the static variable there. So it's not gonna matter that I indicate that this one was created with static. The only way would be to make sure that the constructor of the other one is the one that is using static. But I'm gonna see if I can compile. Let me try this first. It's gonna take a long ass time. As here is probably gonna be a pointer as well, now that it changed the type instead of an address. But maybe it doesn't matter. Yeah, but it's still yeah. It's probably gonna be a pointer and then I have to the reference, I think. Yeah, I'm gonna compile like this first, just see to get the other part because I think there might be a problem the way that I'm thinking about doing. So I'm gonna push back to the vector on the static constructor by passing the this as the thing. And I'm not really sure if it's gonna be a problem or if I'm gonna have to pass as a pointer. So instead of here, I guess the easiest thing to do actually would be to, if it doesn't work, you can just remove the static. But then what would be the point of having the static constructor? I, I think that would work, but then it defeats the point of having the constructor like this. So on the macro, you just remove the this value there when you're creating the static C string, and then from outside, after you create the other string, you just would push from the macro. You push to the thing there. So one thing that I'm gonna ask is there a way to specify a special constructor? If there's a way on C++ to specify the difference, then I can just create or change the constructor that's, or actually create another one probably, and then on that one I can push. Because the problem is that, like, if there isn't a constructor, I think there isn't a way to couple the static keyword with the class. So that should be done outside. So the only option, the best option would be to just change the macro, because then each time you want to create a static string name, you would just use the macro. But I'm not really sure if that's the way that they intended to be. So that's the problem. Another, I think that there might be a way. Let me think. Because another thing that I could do is just put a variable. So instead of having the other variable, I can create a variable inside of the string name that is not static, it's just a flag variable. And then I use that variable as is looping over the table. And then I call onRef based on that variable. So I check to see, but they already have the variable, which is the static count. Huh. Yeah, but the static count is not specific to the string instance. So it has to be a flag variable, and then based on the flag variable, if it is true, then you call the onRef again. Maybe that's better than creating another global variable. Let me see here. Okay, so here they are just deleting from the table. Hmm. Then you would get into the same problem of the problem is, like, you can't use the I because it would be different things as well. So I think you kind of have to create another vector or something, because I can't use this I here. So the D that I have here, the data, is different than the one that the actual string name is gonna have, Because as far as I understand now, the way that it works, that you have a table that is a static variable. And the table works as the template for allocating the memory on the data memory that is gonna be relative to the string name. So the first time initialize the memory for the data, and then it's gonna that memory is gonna point to the table, and then on the other times you're just gonna create other references to the same place in memory that exists on the table. So the I here is not the same as like you can't access the actual instance from the string name, but maybe you can from the data. But I think probably not. I think this way is probably fine. So create another variable, keep track of the static ones, and then you unreference them before cleaning up the other ones. So the focus should be on the how to make sure that all the static string names are created are pushed to the global thing. Same problem. If I do the pointer, I think if I do a pointer, maybe it works. Because now it's gonna cast the type. I'll try this. I'm pretty sure that I did this at some point, but I don't remember where exactly. Maybe handless. There was some place that I did something like this, I think. This one is different because I think it was on the graph. Yeah, so it was here, I think. Oh, so it's using key? Oh, but this is hash map as well. Let me see that. Yeah, so here I'm doing the same. Hmm. So I guess this way it works because it's a pointer, so it doesn't try to cast the type. Just complaining about this thing, you know. It should work because it's exactly the same thing. The problem might be on the pushback there, like this. Nice. I think it worked, but it's gonna be the issue that I said, so it's not gonna clean up properly, I think. So the next thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna test to see if it works. Probably gonna show the messages, and the next thing I'm gonna do is try to change the macro. So I'm gonna have to spend some time thinking about what is the best way to deal with this. Because I think like the problem with just changing the macro here is that, but I think it doesn't matter if you have other situations where you don't want to create a static C string and you want to create a static string name, because it's just gonna show the warning anyway, and then you're gonna be able to see. It's gonna be the same message, and then you can hunt for the place you put. It's not the best, I think, but it's kind of hard to think about a different solution. it might crash the thing as well. Because it might create a dangling pointer because it is destroying the one. It destroys this it destroys the string name that created with the static constructor after it runs the macro, and then obviously it doesn't destroy the other one. So what might happen is that it tries to, but if that's the case, it's not gonna have the data. So I think it's probably not gonna happen. Oh, it does crash. Mm. So it is probably the stuff that I was saying. So I think what is happening is that when you use the sname macro, it's going to create the string, this string here, and then it pushes this string to the vector there, and then it destroys this one. But and then when you try to access the data, it doesn't have the thing. So obviously what I can do is just change. So I think that it wouldn't solve the problem, but it would stop from crashing, I think. If we just put like this. Because then I think when you deletes when you unreferences the other one, like if it is not the one that created the actual thing, then it's not going to delete the memory. It's just going to make it a null point. It's going to make the data a null pointer for that string name. But when it is the case that that string created the memory, it's just going to delete the memory, I think. So yeah, but I think either way, because the pointer is just going to be a null pointer. So if you check for, it's probably going to solve from crashing, but it's not going to solve the problem, I think. So in order to solve the problem, I have to think about what is the best way to make sure you have to couple the static keyword with the string name functionality. The question is what is the best way to do this? Yeah, probably I think the solution with the variable is probably the best one because every time you're gonna create a static string name, you're gonna make it equal to something, I think. Uh, so obviously there is a situation where you're not gonna make it equal, but I think that like for those situations, it's probably fine to leave the message, the warning. But either you're gonna because on that situation, what you can do is just change the constructor, obviously. So and then for the macro, it's gonna be a situation where it's always gonna run the constructor that initializes one string name with the other one, and then for that case, you can just get the variable to see if it's static. If it is static, then you push that one. Hmm. The problem is that I would have to remove the previous one, like because yeah. Or just change the macro and then don't use the other. But it's still kind of bad because maybe it doesn't matter that much if it doesn't crash now. It still crashes. Hmm. So let me think. I think it's crashing here because it's trying to access, doesn't access. I'm gonna run this first and then I'll think about what I should do. I'll be right back. Just gonna see if it is the thing that I'm thinking there. The reason why it's crashing. I might stop streaming now and just think about a way to solve. But what I wanted to do on this stream is just explain what was going on. Because I'm pretty confident that this is a problem. So now it's just a matter of thinking about what is the best way to determine that, to couple the static creation of the string name with the logic on the string name class. To make sure that it becomes unlikely that you're going to create a string name using the static keywords and not keep track of that string name so that you can clean up later before the message there, the error that shows the message runs. Hmm. So the problem is that the pointer exists, but the thing doesn't. And it does have the data, it just doesn't. Or maybe something that is happening here. Hmm. There's something else. Hmm. This is interesting. Uh, uh, hmm. So like I think what happens is that when it doesn't clean the string names, it just unreferences them from the thing. But the interesting thing is like how does it work when it comes to the data? Because a lot of the times when the destructor runs, it's not going to delete the data because it only creates the data once, which is going to be the actual data on the table. Just the one that gets cleaned on the cleanup function there, that is the function that shows the message. So, and for the other times, it just makes the data to point to a null pointer. And this part, I thought that is kind of weird as well on the other constructors. Because like, for example, on this one, it's just updating the data value of this string name to the other one. But then how does it work when it comes to the memory? I didn't understand how this works. Because this one's not going to this one's not being initialized with the memnew macro. So how does it allocate memory for this one? Maybe it doesn't, and it doesn't matter because you only have one place. So I think it might be the case that like most string names are gonna exist, if not all, but the thing that doesn't exist anymore is the data. because it's saying that the count is 0. But this, I think, probably comes from their code. Yeah. So I think they're just crashing on purpose when the count reaches 0 because you're not supposed to. Because when the count reaches 0, you're supposed to delete the thing. Like the data was already deleted when the count is 0. It's like this is gonna decrement, and then when this decrements, the condition is gonna be true. The one that returns there on the graph. Yeah, because like this is gonna be equal to 0, so that means that this is gonna be true, which means it's gonna delete the memory here. So we're not supposed to run the condition. You're not supposed to decrement the count when it's already 0. Yeah. So let me think about this. Oh, obviously, the easiest thing to do is just to check if the count's not 0. The more interesting thing that I'm thinking about is like how does it work on the relationship between the memory and the string names, because obviously the pointer is going to exist. So both the pointer to the string name and the data exists, and the memory doesn't exist anymore. I think I'm just gonna do this. I'm just gonna check. I'm gonna check both actually. Maybe it's better to just check the. I think I have to check both. Let's see if this works. But maybe I want the error to happen. Like I want it to crash because it's a sign that you misuse the thing. Because I think the reason why that's happening is because I'm pushing the wrong string name to the global static variable. So that's the issue. So maybe I do want the mass. I do want it to crash. Or I could check, like I could check this one first, and then check the two other ones inside of the condition, and then just put a message if they are not 0. Yeah, that's probably better. So like just signal that you're passing the wrong string name to you're pushing the wrong string name. Hmm. I guess I'm gonna have to go over again, see what's going on. Because now I'm not really sure what is happening. It should be checking to see if it's greater, and it shouldn't have the data, so. Hmm. So I guess when it deleted the data, it probably deleted the storage here on the atomic variable. So I think that's what's happening. But then how does it have? I think it has there because it's the thing that's like it's pushing I'm pushing the wrong string name to the global static vector that I created there. So the data gets deleted, but the other pointer still exists. Uh, Both the string name and the data have to exist. But I think that like I think the engine doesn't delete the memory for the string names. It just it because it only assigns the memory once on the table. So I think that, like when you create the string name, but then how does it work? That's the thing that's kind of. I think it's just based on the compiler probably, like something like because it is static, you don't need to allocate memory. I'm gonna ask this sure because I'm not really sure. It's kind of hard to describe what I'm thinking about. It's basically just a situation where it's going to be true here. So I'm just gonna copy this. I think the issue is only when you use static probably because when you don't use static, it's just gonna run the destructor. So I think the string name automatically gets destroyed. So that's the reason why I don't need to allocate memory. Unless you use the static, then it doesn't get destroyed. But then probably the compiler, when you use static, yeah, but because when you use static, it's like you're creating a global variable. So I think what happens is that the compiler allocates a address in memory related to that variable. But I'm not really sure how it works with the. I think it has to allocate the space for all the classes gonna need on memory. So I think when you use a static, you don't need to use the menu to manually allocate memory because the compiler does for you. But yeah, so and it's just locating memory for the data, not the string name. So let me think on this. But then how is it possible? I think the reason why, yeah, the reason why is because of the static. So like what's happening is that I'm pushing a string name that is the wrong one to the static thing, and then it gets automatically destroyed by the compiler. Not the compiler because like it gets destroyed on runtime when it goes out of scope. And then the destructor runs for that string, but I pushed that to the other static thing. So it has the reference still exists, but it is kind of weird. Like because then how is it possible that it's not a null pointer if it is destroying the previous string name? That's the thing that is kind of confusing. It might be because of the way that I'm pushing back. So when I push back with the this keyword. So the mental model that I have in my mind is that when I push back with the this keyword to the vector is going to create a pointer of string name to that instance of the string name. So it doesn't make a lot of sense because if that string name was deleted, then the original pointer that was pushed to the static variable that keeps track of all the string names should be a null pointer now. And if it is a null pointer, then it would fail in the first condition. So the thing that is weird is that it has the pointer and the pointer has the data as well. So they're both not null pointers. And the count doesn't exist. So that's the thing that is weird. The memory for the counts. Because the memory for the counts should be connected to the string name instance. I think it is the counts. Yes, not sure if it's gonna be able to answer. But I think that the race condition doesn't make sense because it is an atomic variable. So I think the atomic should take care of that. It might be because of the race conditions, because of the data. Because I think that the is not the mutex inside of the string name is not the only place that Godot uses threads. So Godot uses locks as well outside. And I've been trying to understand more how it works, but I don't understand very well yet. That's why I'm writing down here. But it's kind of weird. I think in order to understand the threads, I'm gonna have to spend more time on other parts of the engine. But I think that they use a technique called thread pool, where they have a class where they create a bunch of threads, and then they put the threads on a pool, and then for tasks you allocate threads for different things. Because the cost of creating a thread and destroying a thread is high. So I think this is a technique that people use. So you create several threads at the same time, or create several threads, put the threads on the pool, and then just reuse the same threads. And then and then also on top of that, I think that they have some code that is not directly related to the threads, but they created the code inside of the node class and the string tree and stuff like that. And based on that logic that they have on their own classes, they call functions on the threads that are actually coming from standard libraries. So because of that, they use these locks here at some places, and it might be the case that there are multiple different threads changing the data. So even though the value inside of the data should be atomic, so it should prevent you from accessing multiple times or from different threads at the same time. Because outside of the data, you can have different threads, and I'm not putting a lock there, then one thread could delete the data while the other one is trying to access. Like so. So I think it's probably unlikely that this is the case, but it might be an issue. But the problem is, in order to be able to know if that's the case or not, I would have to figure out all the other parts. I think it's unlikely because I'm putting that code at the end when it cleans up everything. And I think that the string name cleanup happens after the. Yeah, it definitely does happen. Not definitely, but I'm pretty sure it does happen after the string name is cleaned up. Or the sync tree is cleaned up. So I think it shouldn't be anything related to trans. But I'm not 100% sure. I still think that it should be like no pointers here. So just checking to see if the thing exists should check to see if it's a no pointer already. So they probably both exist, and then for whatever reason the account doesn't. I think I'm just gonna stop streaming now, and I'm going to see, because this is not the only issue. The other issue is to figure out what is the best way to couple the static with this functionality here. But the error is pretty clear. I think I'm pretty confident that this is the problem. So what is happening is that the engine never cleans up the static string names, and the issue was the message, not the uh, that specific case are the ones that are not being cleaned up. It never cleans up the static ones. And it's not that big of a deal because I think it's meant to be that way because the static is meant to last for the entire duration of the program. But I think it does make some sense to just create this function before it cleans up before it deletes the memory on the data on the table. It makes sense to clean up the static ones. So I'm just gonna see if there is just to make the warning go away. To see if there is a way to keep track of all the static string names and then clean them up by looping here. And this would allow to still have the message to show string names that are not being cleaned up and make sure that the static ones are cleaned up at the end as well. I'm gonna do one more time to see. I wanna see the values there. And then I'm gonna stop streaming and I'm gonna think about a way to solve this off stream. And one thing that I could do is put a breakpoint here as well. Yeah, but I'm gonna do element. If it stops there, then I might see. I promise here I'm not gonna be able to know for sure if it is doing what I'm thinking it's supposed to be doing. But I think it is creating like a pointer inside of the vector, and the pointer points to the place in memory that the string is at. So the instance, like the this is a reference to the class. So you should create a pointer inside of the this vector to this specific class, which in my mind, would make sense that when the class goes out of scope, it destroys the class, and then the pointer becomes a null pointer. Just gonna remove. Yeah, so here it is the scene tree uh, cleanup part. So the string names are cleaned up after the scene tree. So I think it's unlikely that it's something related to threads. It's probably something related to the null pointer. Or to the reference pointers. So it does have the pointer here, I think. How is it possible? It might be because the vector is static, so it maintains the yeah, but like it's weird because it should be a null pointer. Like if the place that is pointing to, maybe if I have to dereference first. Yeah, I think what is happening is that it still has the pointer, and the pointer points. Yeah, but if it did point to something null, then you wouldn't be able to access the data. Like, so how does it make sense? Because the data should be a null pointer. So obviously the easiest way to fix is just to check for the other values. But I'm more concerned on understanding what is going on than to solve the thing. Because I think solving all this stuff is gonna be relatively easy. I just wanna, and I'm probably gonna spend more time studying the class to see, to make sure if I really understand what is going on. So I have to clarify the like how the relationship between the the way that the memory is allocated when you use memnew and when you don't use memnew. but the thing that is hard is that is kind of hard to think about how to search for this for the clarifications. So what I think is happening is that whenever you don't use memory, the compiler is still going to allocate memory, but and the memory, like the ChatGPT said, is going to be based on the process and it's going to be based on the stack and the heap. So it's going to allocate memory on the stack when you don't use memory because you're not using malloc. And then you should destroy the memory based on the stack. So if you have pointers that you create, it should become no pointers. And if it is no pointers, the thing maybe you should search for the static. Okay, how does because I think what happens when you create a static variable is that it's just gonna be I'm not I think it's not it doesn't allocate on the heap, but it allocates on a different because I do remember there is another part for variables I think on the process. So you have the static you have the stack, the heap, then you have the part for the code, the text, and you have part for the data I think. So I think it does allocate in a special place for global variables. So I think that's is allocated on that place for the vector, and it is something to do with the relationship between the pointer that you, the pointer inside of the static vector and the original thing that you passed. But the thing, like, I think for the pointer, it can make sense for the pointer to exist because the pointer is on the static vector. But what doesn't make sense is how do you have the data? That's the thing that is kind of weird. So I have to see how can I clarify what is going on with that. That's basically what I have in my mind, but it's hard to think about specific ways to search for this. 'Cause I think that's what is going on. That is the only thing that makes sense. So both of them still exist for some reason, but the class was deleted, I think, because it ran out of the scope, so the memory doesn't exist anymore. And because the memory doesn't exist, the variables don't exist. So when you try to get, it crashes because it's trying to load an address that doesn't exist anymore on the ISO stuff there. I think that's what's going on. So the value doesn't exist anymore. and the memory doesn't exist because the address doesn't exist. So I guess the question is, how is it possible? Yeah, I need to spend time like clarifying or finding an easy way to, because what I want is to open up branches for exploring the fundamental principles of the question that I have, to clarify the fundamental principles. Because obviously that's more important than solving the thing now, because the fundamental principles are gonna stay the same. So next time that I face something similar, I'm gonna be able to understand the reason behind. But the problem is, as always, like, and those are the hardest things to clarify is when you have specific situations like this. And on C++, the first thing that I found that is very hard to clarify is things related to class hierarchy and abstractions and stuff like that. Because usually what's going to happen is that the situation you have is going to be very unique. And because it's very unique, it becomes very hard to search for the thing because most of the videos and resources are going to be for generic stuff. So the path is going to be to like create branches of exploration from which you can go from the nuance, which is the complexity of the circumstance you have, to the generic, which is the fundamental principles. I think that the best way to do this is just by asking questions about what is the fundamental things that are related to this, and then how can I break down to concepts, into the fundamental concepts that are related to this, and then put the pieces together as I clarify one piece at a time of like the components of this, and then you synthesize by putting the parts together later. And that's probably the best. Yeah, so I have to clarify what are the fundamental principles. I think like obviously it's gonna be static, and then pointers, choose static vectors, arrays, and then pointers inside of classes. Yeah, so the main part that I wanted to talk about, so I'm probably not gonna do a stream explaining this stuff because I think it's pretty clear now what was going on. The issue is that they don't clean up the static string names, never, on all situations, not the specific ones that were giving the warning. And the reason why that those situations that were giving the warning were the only ones that were giving the warning is because those are the only ones where there was a difference between the amount of static string names created and the string names that were not being cleaned properly because of that one issue, which was this one here, which they create a string name and then they put that string name on a static hash map. So even though the string name is not static, it is put inside of a static hash map, and that's the reason why it doesn't clean up that one, because they were not cleaning the hash map. And because it created this difference, then it was showing the warning because the message was dependent on the difference. So it was very misleading because it makes you think that the problem is with static string names, that for some reason on those situations the static string names are not being cleaned properly, but on other situations they were. But that's not the case. They are never cleaning up the static string names. It's just that they were only displaying the message for those situations. That was the issue. And the way to solve this is just by changing the message here, I think, because then it becomes a lot less misleading. And figuring out a way to clean up static string names. So I think it's gonna depend. I'm not gonna do a PR because I have a wrong version of the engine, and I don't know how to do PRs, and I don't want to just think about it. I'm probably just gonna make another comment there on the issue. So if someone else wants to solve this and do the PR, then obviously do it. But I think that the best thing to do is probably just create this function, create another variable, and figure out how to track the static string name, static string names. Then at the end here, just clean them up first before the message, and then have some warning message or figure out a way to make sure that if there are string names that were created with the static, but they're for some reason they're not being cleaned, that you show the message here. But maybe you don't need to do that because on the situation you're always gonna have the message anyway. Just gonna be this message here. So maybe the other thing you could do is just put the count static count here. But I think you're always gonna have when you do have static string names, they're also gonna have the count, so it's not necessary. So you're gonna be able to see if they are static string names based on the same message here. So in a situation where for whatever reason, like you forgot to push the static string name to the if I can't find a way to couple them, which is I think is gonna be very hard to do, because the only way would be from the constructor to do it from inside of the class, and the other ways you're gonna have to push the static string name to the global thing outside of the class. That's the challenge now, is figuring out what is the best way to couple the creation of static string names to some way in which you can clean them up later. And then to make sure that if you forget, there is a message that's gonna say that there are static string names at. But I think that this message is gonna be enough because you're gonna be able to see based on the static count. So the biggest difference is just removing the condition here. Just printing whenever you have any string names that were not cleaned properly, and then trying to clean the static string name somehow. I think that probably the best way is to always make sure that you use the macro when you want a static string name, and maybe create another macro for if you don't want to use the static C string, because that way it allows you to couple on the macro, because you have to do it outside. I think there isn't a way to from inside of the string to make sure you put there, because you can't ensure that the constructor that like the people are gonna use the constructor that is supposed to be the static constructor when they are using the static URL outside. So this is the issue. So maybe you do have to change the warning message, because it is gonna still be misleading, because if you let's say for accident you use static string name outside, but you forget to use the constructor that's specific to the static string name, then the message is just gonna be that there is a string name, and it's not gonna be you're not gonna be able to know that is actually the static one, because it's not gonna increase the static count because you used the wrong constructor. So I think the best way to compromise and to do it from the macro. So I have to couple them from outside of the class somehow. And then you just settle for having the warning message that is not very specific, because you're gonna have to figure out anyway, regardless of whether or not it's static. If there is the warning message, it means that it wasn't cleaned up properly. I think the biggest difference is making sure that you clean up the static ones here, the ones that are created from inside of the macro, and the ones that you remember to put here. And yeah, I'm going to think about different terms to search for this and to clarify the fundamental principles related to this. So maybe I'll talk about this next time that I string, but I'm not gonna, I'm probably, yeah, I'm gonna try to finish the solution of string. So maybe next time I do talk about what I came up with and why this was an issue. I'm not really sure. I might just continue to go with the snaps that I have there. And I'm pretty happy that I'm pretty sure that this is solved, so I can focus on the other stuff now. So see you next time.